Welcome back, friends and scoundrels. I am Bran,
And I'm Lynn.
and this is Threads of Logos, where we're going to talk about specific topics as best we can through various stories. And today, we have chosen Rogue One as our first one to do it with.
Rogue One, a Star Wars story.
Yes. And as you may have suggested from the or picked up from the title, suggestion that we are going to try to focus on the idea of faith as opposed to hope. Okay. I
Okay.
was I was hoping that would lead you into a segue, but you were
I
busy scribbling over there.
was busy doodling. And I didn't have a segue anyway, so I don't know what you wanted from me.
Yeah. Well, I was hoping it would happen, and we see how well that worked.
You shouldn't have put your faith in me.
Or maybe I should have had better faith. Anyways,
Anyways.
I suppose to start this off, we should differentiate between the two, so that way we have a more clear understanding of what we're trying to convey here.
Okay. So you want the definitions?
Well, I have definitions.
You have definitions?
I do have definitions. I went through Merriam-Webster
I
on the
also went through
on the
Merriam-Webster.
online.
Also online.
I picked the ones that I felt best conveyed what our intentions are.
I wrote down the entire definition
Okay.
of both.
Well then, since you have the full of all of it,
The full of all of it.
yeah, you're full of it.
So faith. The allegiance or duty The allegiance to duty or a person. Sincerity of intentions. It is also the belief and trust in and loyalty to Hashem, or the belief in traditional doctrines, or firm belief in something for which there is no proof, or complete trust. It is also defined as something that is believed, especially with strong conviction. And then hope is to cherish a desire with anticipation, to want something to happen to be true, to desire with expectation of obtaining fulfillment, or a desire accompanied by expectation of or belief in fulfillment, the expectation of success.
Okay. So from that, I have them in hope and faith order. But for hope, the one that I pulled that I felt best got to what we're trying to do here is the desire accompanied by expectation or belief in fulfillment. And then for faith, I have firm belief in something for which there is no proof. And I'm editing that something intangible. Because it's not necessarily that there isn't proof of it.
Right.
It's that it's an intangible thing. It's an idea or a spirituality, whatever. Whatever that thing is, because like your nation, you can kind of say that there's something there, but it's more of a set of ideas and honor and duty and all that jibber jabber.
All that jazz.
Now, when I threw that assignment at you earlier, I was expecting you to just bring your ideas, not
I have my ideas
definitionals.
also. I also have ideas. I have little think thoughts that go with it.
Okay.
So, my think thought with it is time based.
Okay.
Faith is in the present, and hope is for the future. Because faith is something you have and you feel and you believe right now in the moment. Hope is what you hope to happen in the future. In the terms of Rogue One, they hope to successfully accomplish their mission, but they have faith in what they're doing and each other. Because
Okay.
faith is more than belief that something will happen. Faith needs trust also. And that's what grounds it in the present and separates it from hope, which is for a future event.
So my ideas on this.
Oh, I only get to do one idea?
Oh,
So I have a second idea.
No, that's not what I was saying at all.
So, and my second thought on it is hope is built on faith. It's because, again, in reference to Rogue One, their hope of the successful outcome is their faith and trust in the Force, each other, the mission, what have you. And based on that faith in those things, it's what gives them hope for their successful outcome. So rebellions may be built on hope, but hope is built on faith.
Okay, so my purpose behind this, or where I'm coming at from this, is getting a more clear separation between the two, because like so many other words that have been diluted and misused a lot through, or dilution through misuse a
Yeah,
lot of times, this is one where these words get used interchangeably a lot.
they do.
So it sullies them and makes it that way. It's that they are completely interchangeable, or they actually have two very different things. And then faith's a funny one too, because it also carries these strong religious um, implications with it,
Yeah.
but it doesn't necessarily have to be
No, it doesn't have to
religious or
be
spiritual.
religious.
It's just like in the definitions, like in regards to similarities with religious ones, it doesn't really define that, which is why I went with the definition that I chose:
Mm-hmm.
firm belief in something that is intangible, because it separates it enough from that religious. It includes the religion, but it also separates it from the religion.
Yeah.
So for me, I'm looking at these as two very separate and distinct things, and hope is something that you just want to happen, and I put it on a lesser pedestal than I do faith, or
I agree. I mean, not lesser,
lower level.
lower level than faith. Faith is the greater thing. But then that comes back to my hope is built on faith because faith is the foundation for it.
Kind of. It can be, but you can hope for something without having any faith in it at all.
Give me an example.
Well, like you apply for jobs. So I've been doing this recently. There are jobs that I hope to get, I would like to, and then there was a job that I had faith that I was going to get, and it doesn't seem like I'm going to. But there's, I'm not sure what I want to say here. I wasn't mentally prepared for this.
I think there's faith underlying that, the faith that you will be provided for, that there is something for you, because that is true. You do have faith that Hashem is going to provide for you. And that is a grounding for this hope. It's just, you got to look for it.
Well,
But I think it's there.
but then also to this, in faith in the more spiritual regard, is that I didn't get this job, that I felt very, very good about my, not my, about the possibility of me getting it. I was very excited for it. Everything seemed to be going good, but then I just haven't heard anything.
That's
So,
hope still. You've just described hope.
no,
Yes, you have. You've described hope. Just because you felt good about it doesn't mean it wasn't hope.
no, that that's a whole other matter. Um, because that one, I had faith that it was a path that I was going on, and there was a lot more intention behind it. And I suppose that's where I'm trying to actually get at with this difference between faith and hope, is that faith has a lot more intention behind it, whereas hope is just something that you can feel. It's just, to me, it's more of a just an optimistic feeling of something. But
Right.
whereas faith is, there's more knowing and more intention behind it. Faith does actually require a little bit of action behind it.
See, I think faith needs the trust in that intangible thing. That's why we're gonna have to agree to disagree on this topic. I think in this other instance, you're still describing hope. It's just a stronger hope.
Maybe. But as I was trying to say also with it earlier, that this, my own personal faith has been a little bit of a struggle with me lately because I feel like I keep getting stuck in this job that I so desperately want to get out of,
Yeah.
and that maybe there is a purpose for me to be here, or that it just maybe it is a the best opportunity or provides a lot more opportunities for me to do other things that I want and need to do.
It is a possibility, no doubt.
I'm just trying to say that hope lends itself being more of an empty gesture sometimes than faith because there's something backing faith.
Yeah.
That's where I'm trying. That's kind of where I was trying to get from. Anyways,
Anyways.
so I have right in the beginning we have a call to faith from Lyra, almost very first thing. There's a little bit that happens to it before that, some general speaking, but then we get Lyra sending Jen off, saying trust the force.
The literal call to faith.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, you'll be taken care of, you'll be provided for somehow. We don't know what that is.
And that faith, I think, that Lyra has in her call to faith there is what enables her to let Jin go. Because she has faith that he's going to be taken care of. She doesn't hope for it. She has faith that it's going to happen.
And like I was talking about a minute ago, trying to get my point across with the intention behind it, is that they have done so many things to prepare for this moment.
Yeah.
So it's not like they ran away and started doing this farming and were hoping that they wouldn't be found, and then it does happen and they're hoping that she'll be taken care of. They took steps so that way they have a foundation under them to believe that she will be taken care of.
Yeah, and I think there's a difference in their parenting too. I mean, we don't see them much, Lyra and Galen, but I think Lyra is more firmly rooted in faith, and I think Galen's actions are more hopeful than faith based. Because I,
Oh, interesting.
because and he uses the word hope too. That he hopes his message finds Saw, and he hopes they're able to do something. But I feel like having lost Jin and Lyra, he has lost the things he's had faith in. So all he's left with is hope.
Well, because I've got notes on that later for under the part of having your faith rewarded, but we can talk about it here because it's interesting. In the beginning, I'll agree that he does have a lot more hope, and he does have hope that these things are going to work, but you don't undertake the actions that Galen does and put yourself that much into it on just hope. He has to have faith that somehow all of this is going to work out. And it's using that term stardust and with the intention of Jin finding it.
Because he has faith in her.
Yes.
Nothing else.
Well, and he worked with Saw for quite some time too. We get that implication at least in the movie. And feel free to bring in the book a little bit too.
And he does say in his hollow message, Jin, my stardust. So he does say the key word in case it only gets to Saw.
Just to remind.
Yeah.
Because he says it good 2 or 3 times, doesn't he?
I can only think of the one instance, but it's possible.
Again, it kind of becomes his cause. And enough so that he is able to change and make corrections to some of his weaknesses, which is lying.
He was always a terrible liar.
But it's a lot easier to lie if you believe in the thing. And that, I keep saying belief, but belief is a strong aspect of faith.
Yeah. But you also have to consider in that too, for as far as making him a better liar goes, is once you've got nothing left to lose, that might become easier. When he lied in the beginning, he had to lie to actually protect Jin and Lyra. Jin and Lyra are gone. The only person he has to protect with his lies now is himself.
Yeah.
He's got nothing left to lose. And that's freedom.
It is. Let's go back to where this actually all started with the rebellions are built on hope. So it's said a couple times in the movie. The first time is with Cassian when they first pick up Jin. That first time feels like it's more of a platitude that is kind of this bumper sticker saying that they have in the rebellion.
Because he's explaining the plan while they're on Jeddah to Jin, that they're going to meet this guy's sister and they're going to hope Jin's name gets them into Seesaw, and that's when she questions hope, and he says rebellion's built on hope. Just to clarify what you're talking about.
I was a little bit off there too.
Yeah.
I thought it was a little bit earlier. But also that's you've kind of sensed the desperation, and hope comes out of desperation a lot of times too.
It does. But then so can faith.
Faith can help you through desperate times, which is different than having something that you want versus this will pass. This too shall pass.
I suppose.
I'm not articulating it very well.
No, I think I'm kind of getting what you're saying.
Like, what I'm trying to say here is people that don't already have something, which is where that faith would come from, in a moment of desperation, in an attempt to maintain a positive attitude and some optimism, will find something to hope for.
Yeah.
And that can turn into faith, eventually, maybe. But people who have faith, and there's some stats that have come across my feed from a variety of people or studies, that people who have generally religious faith tend to have better mental health. I think it's because it gives them a much stronger foundation in their life.
I can see that.
Yeah. But then you have that second use of rebellions built on hope.
Now Jin is speaking to the council, and they're questioning it, and she tells them that rebellions are built on hope.
Mm-hmm.
Because they don't want to go to Scarif to get the plans.
But this is a different Jin who has been reminded of her cause and the cause, and now has this faith again. And she knows what's going on. And it's also a moment of, is it juxtaposition? Is that the word I want?
I don't know, is it?
It's a crux moment where you're either going to go one way or the other.
Yeah.
It's time to fight or lose everything. Is really what this point is.
This is the Jin that has come out of the wilderness.
Yes. She's stopped looking down. But she's oh my gosh. The word wants to be there. But she's found her purpose and her calling again. And that's where she's speaking from in this moment when she says rebellions are built on hope. And this is also a really fun or a really interesting point in the movie, because you have the juxtaposition between the true believers, the people who have faith in the cause, the people who have hope, and the LARPers.
And the people who don't have true faith in the cause.
Who don't have any at all. Like, they know it's the right thing, and they're there for that, but they have no reason to believe in it or anything. That's why let's just surrender, roll over on our belly, and just give up.
Yes. And as I pointed out when we were watching the movie, there's a difference in, I don't want to say class exactly, but a lot of the true believers are the
warriors.
The warriors, the fighters, the pilots, the ones that have left the Empire, the defectors.
Yeah.
And then the ones who don't have faith in the cause would be your senators, are the senators. Well, the ones who don't want to do action. The ones that don't want to do. And I think part of what does this is these fighters have gotten their hands actually dirty.
Yes.
They've done the grunt work. They're the ones that need to have the faith rewarded. Because in the book, Cassian constantly, he frequently references this need that he sees in Jin. And I think there's a need in all of them. And it's a need to have this faith rewarded. And the Pathfinders and the pilots and all of them and the spies, because they've done so much that have made them question themselves maybe and tarnish themselves. Because you see it in Cassian when he has to kill sets.
Yeah.
For the good of the cause.
And I've got some section on that too that we can come back to, or that we'll visit later.
But these are the guys that need to have their faith rewarded. But because the senators and the commanders just issue the commands and aren't actually getting their hands dirty and aren't they're in it, they're not actually seeing the suffering. Yes, they know it, but they're not seeing it. They're not living it. So they don't have that faith and that need that the others have.
Well, and so a couple things. One, this reminds me of one of the strongest lyrics out of a song, to me, at any rate. It's from So Cold by Breaking Benjamin.
Mm-hmm.
And it's strong men die while wise men wonder. And that's kind of what you have on here. Is you got the philosophical types, the thinkers, and then you've got the people who are the actors, the doers, and everything that you said. We don't need to revisit that in such detail until later. But that's kind of the difference there is you've got the thinkers, the politicians, and the behind the scenes people. They're the ones that have hope because they're like, okay, we don't have enough support, we'll break off, regroup later, and maybe we can try again.
Yeah.
Whereas the people who have faith, again, see it's now or never. If we don't do this now, we lose everything. Because that really, like, everything's at stake in this moment. Because you got this, hasn't been demonstrated to them yet, but there is great destruction. There's still a lot of people that don't believe.
Yeah.
And that's a good clear line between them too, between the three. So,
Pictures or it didn't happen.
The non-believers who either don't believe it because there isn't proof, or who don't believe it because they don't want to believe it. That willful ignorance.
Yeah, willful ignorance. Yes.
That it's easier for me to not believe it than
if we pretend this isn't true.
Yeah.
Then something this horrible can't be true.
Then you've got the people who have hope who neither believe nor disbelieve.
Mm-hmm.
Really, all right. We're willing to concede that this might be true, but again, where's your proof?
Yeah.
Other than Jeddah got destroyed and everybody knows it.
Well, there's knowing it and there's knowing it, because you're being told that Jeddah's been destroyed, but if you haven't seen it, there's still lack of proof. Being told is still lack of proof.
Yeah.
You can still bury your head in the sand if you haven't actively seen it happen or seen the aftermath.
And then the full faith participants that believe it because they have faith in these people, because these people have proven themselves or whatever. And the kind of opposite end of that spectrum of, I would rather believe it and be wrong than not believe it and be wrong.
Yeah.
That if I'm wrong about this existing, okay, whatever.
Good, I was wrong.
Yeah. Ooh. Baruch Hashem. Yeah. I don't know. Do we have anything else? Do you have anything else on that particularly?
No.
So I broke in here with something else a little bit later on in the film when they're in the prison, or when they're in Saw's holding cells.
Yeah.
Where Cassian says, I'm beginning to think that the Force and I have different priorities.
Okay.
So I'm considering this a point of difference between faith and hope again, because if he had faith, he'd understand that he's playing a role in the priorities of the Force, that he's a participant in what the Force wants. Not that you're two things kind of working towards the same thing, and that he's actually exactly where he needs to be to learn what he needs to learn, and so that way he can get Bodhi, the pilot. And then at the same moment, you have Chirrut, who is demonstrating faith, who's doing his prayer, I'm one with the Force is with me. And because Cassian makes that statement, that we have different priorities. And then you hear Chirrut a moment or two later praying and Bay's giving him guff over it. And then in their scene, as it's happening, not necessarily in direct order in the movie watching,
Yeah.
but you see that play out. How we realize the pilot's there, and everything begins to take its course as the Force will have it.
That's interesting. I viewed that a little differently.
Okay.
So the way I viewed it is, yes, Cassian says the Force and I have different priorities. I saw that as a lack of understanding of what the Force wants. Because the Force is, for lack of anything else, ineffable. And sure, it understands to an extent that because he's lost everything too, but because he studied it,
Mm-hmm.
because his faith is perhaps deeper or in a tangible thing, like because he has faith in the Force. Cassian has faith, but it's more abstracted. But sure, it might understand that sacrifices might need to be made.
Mm-hmm.
And Cassian doesn't understand that. He's the questioner of why do all these innocents have to die? It's a question that's constantly asked. Why does Hashem let all these people die? When you look at the Exodus, Holocaust, all of these things, why are all these innocent people have to die? But you have to look at what comes after.
And there's a between the Force and in reality with this is that's not how Hashem and the Force work. They aren't there to intervene at every step of our lives.
They're not micromanagers?
No. We are left to our own devices, otherwise we wouldn't have free will. That would kind of undermine the point of allowing that for us. And so we do these things, and it's not until things get desperately out of hand that Hashem, or in context of the story, the Force, intervene. All right, this has gotten way out of hand. Like, your kids are fighting, and you let it go on, but then it starts getting real physical.
So you got to step in.
So you got to step in.
And there's the greater thing too that within Star Wars as a whole that needs to be considered when talking about the Force is they always talk about bringing balance to the Force, and they're not truly balancing it. Their view of balance to the Force is
Our side is in control.
No light side. That's not balance.
Yes, because you can't know good without evil, and you can't know evil without good.
Exactly. And the Force will try to, as nature would, try to actually balance itself. That's why Order 66 would be a thing that'd be allowed to happen. Because that is the Force being out of balance.
And Yoda and Mace even have that conversation. What if we're wrong about the idea of balance? Well, they kind of have it in episode 2, but it's a lot better in the novelization.
Mm-hmm. It always is.
What if we're wrong about what balance means? We're 10,000 strong, and they are only 2.
Yeah, that doesn't sound like balance.
No.
And that's something you have to consider when considering how the Force acts and balances things, because in reality, that's how things work too. Because you can't have faith without doubt. You can't know good without bad.
Well, a great real life example, and I like to use this for other things a lot of times, but Yellowstone and the wolves, or lack thereof, because we murdered them all off, because they're such a pest to the things that we want.
Yeah.
So in the mid to late 1800s, even into the early 1900s, we all but obliterated them.
Yeah.
The wolves. And Yellowstone National Park, as a result, almost became a desert because there were so many deer and other prey animals and there was no balancing factor to that. So that they were eating everything because there wasn't enough. And as a result of that, all the plant life was dying, and it was ruining the environment. So then they reintroduced wolves. It brought population controls to the deer and elk and whatever other populations that it needed to, and the ecosystem balanced itself out.
Yeah. The thing I just mentioned, I didn't think about it before when I was considering the faith issue, is the you can't have faith without doubt.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a story that Jin tells very well because she has all her doubts before regaining her faith.
Hmm.
Because you can't have faith without doubt. You can't.
No, and that's actually really good way to get into my next thing, because I pose this more as a question in my notes, but what is Jin's position of faith in regards to her father? Because this one happens when they first pick her up.
There you go.
She says, I like to think that he's dead. It makes it easier. But then, and and part of that questioning is, I think deep down she does at the very least want to believe that he isn't all bad.
Well, of course she does. I
And
think she says, "I like to think he's dead. It makes it easier." Is from a personal and kind of childish standpoint. Is he's dead? That's why he never came for me.
well, in
Because um, she kind of locks all these feelings in a hatch in her mind. That hatch from the beginning.
mm-hmm.
It's where she locks all thoughts of her father and Saw as well, which is kind of similar to what Galen does when he talks in his video. He says, I really think about it when I'm at my strongest, and even then.
Yeah.
She does the same thing, like father, like daughter. But everyone, like, you have that, she has that childish hope that her father's going to come for her. And it's easier to think he's dead and that's why he hasn't come than to think he's choosing not to.
Well, and a lot
Because girls always, they always have faith that their father is better than he actually is. Or they hope that he's the man they think he is.
well, and part of that is that she's also growing up with Saw, who is
Also her father.
kinda, yeah, but also he's not shy about what's happening with her father. And part of
this
part of this is that it's very difficult to know what to believe and to have faith in if you have very little or bad information.
Yeah.
Because understanding is a large part of faith as well. And if you have, like I said, if you have little or bad information, it's difficult to have that.
It's like a fire. If you've got little information, little sticks of wood, that fire is small and it can go out easily. The more information and the more understanding you have, the more logs, the greater you can put on, the greater that fire can be. The stronger it is, the brighter it is, the longer it burns.
But then also, this question was spurred on by the duality of what's going on in that moment, because it's also or this was spurred on when she was watching the message of her father, from her father. And I kind of noticed it this last time watching it, that there's this metaphorical thing happening here where Jedda's literally being destroyed, but also her worldview is kind of being destroyed in a way because of the stories that she's kind of forced to tell herself.
Yeah, and it's done well in the book. This part you're talking about, because I talked about how she has this image in her head that everything's locked in that hatch that she hides in.
Mm-hmm.
When Jeddah goes, it blows the hatch wide open and it can never close again.
Yeah.
It's done real well in the book.
Well, and it's done pretty well in the movie too.
It's done pretty well in the movie too.
Because like I picked it up as it was slowly building itself. I'm like, oh, we have this thing happening here. I never quite put this together before, and neat. Yeah, I suppose we can go into this. So, and then I kind of sat on this one for a second. I didn't say anything about it at all, but I also had this other interesting contrast that happened this time watching, because Krennic also has a lot of faith.
He does. We don't like to think about the bad guys,
But also with this contrast, you have these different elements, and this part's gonna get awful dark here, but you have to be careful what you're putting your faith into.
Yeah.
So Krennic has faith in the Imperial machine, and the more he puts into it, the less he's gaining. So this Star Destroyer and all this was essentially his baby, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then when and presumably he not presumably he is under Tarkin's control or under Tarkin's leadership.
Yeah.
And when it's proven successful, Tarkin usurps him and takes credit for the work. And it got me thinking about the differences between good and evil, and that good often rewards, especially those who have faith in it,
Yeah.
and or use their faith in its favor, and evil on the other hand, evil consumes. So this is Krennic being consumed. And there's a contradiction with this movie because the good side is consuming all these people too, right?
Right.
Because all the members of Rogue One die.
Yes.
But there's a grave difference because good and evil do have to be fed, to stick with this metaphor, but evil's insatiable and consumes indiscriminately. Good, however, is fed by the choice of those working in its favor and who are giving themselves to it. And that is why it's not really a contradiction here. Because Krennic doesn't want to be consumed. He doesn't understand what's going on. Doesn't understand what he's given himself to reopen that contradiction with wording. But he's not giving himself to be consumed. He's giving himself over to doing this thing. He doesn't think it's evil.
Yeah.
He's in belief that he's doing good. Because very few people believe that what they're doing is bad.
This is true. Krennic does believe he's doing a good thing.
A just and honorable thing. Never mind, how many people were at Jeddah when it was destroyed.
Yeah. An acceptable loss, I believe he calls it in the book.
Mm. And then he also calls it beautiful. I think he does say those words. I don't remember exactly where, but he does say those words in the movie too.
Acceptable loss?
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't recall. They kind of mush
I think it
together
is.
in my head sometimes.
I think it is in that moment. So that was just something interesting that I noticed this time. And then I have a moment. This is a moment I think that Cassian really shifts from hope to faith. Is after Jeddah when they go to Edu, and he's there to kill Galen.
Yeah.
And it's when he doesn't squeeze the trigger.
Yeah.
And another contrast here is when he does it earlier in the film. And it's obviously very hard for him right now, not just because he's got to go back and face Jin.
Right.
But earlier in the film, he's doing a cost benefit analysis. And if this guy's taken, he's going to squeal like a pig.
Yes, he is. And he's going to be tortured.
Well, he'll be killed for sure, but they probably wouldn't have to torture him much to get him to talk.
This is true.
So, the trade off of him living and a lot of things being messed up and him dying, and again, a little bit of a compassionate kill, if you will, versus with Galen, in the greater scope of things, at this point, Cassian knows that the weapon is active and what it's capable of doing, and that really killing Galen at this point is irrelevant. It is not going to have any effect on anything other than maybe not making other weapons in the future.
Yeah, I don't really understand why Draven insists on going through with it. Sorry, irrelevant.
Desperation You fall back to what you know. You know, we don't rise to the occasion. We fall back to our training.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be my explanation for that. Like he just doesn't know what to do, so just carry forward, and then we'll figure it out. Maybe there's a little bit of the, well, this guy's making weapons. What else could he do? But I'm gonna bring in another phrase, and I almost for a second thought about changing the title of this episode to "The Strongest Stars Have Hearts of Kyber,"
Yeah.
because it's a point that we've talked about quite a bit, right?
It is.
And I think that it is Chirrut saying that about Jin. And my argument for that is, what do stars generally do?
Shine.
They have a gravitational force, and they pull things in.
Oh, I thought you were talking about the fact that he says that she shines. She's a light.
No. I mean, they are that too, generally.
Because Chirrut does say that about her as well.
That's what I should have looked into. He does, and that is also true. But she does have this effect also. Because Chirrut recognizes it, he immediately allows himself into her gravitational pull. There's this thing happening, right?
Right.
He's understanding the force, and that this thing is happening, and she is the center of it, and she has to have this heart of Kyber. And then obviously Baze gets pulled in because he's sure it's Moon. But then this is also the point where I think Cassian really recognizes it, that if I do this, we're going to lose this moment. Because if he had killed Galen, they would have lost Jin.
Yes.
And all of this would have been lost.
I think there's part of it that's personal for him too, because he does, when he has to kill people, it does weigh on him. We are shown that when he kills, I forget his name, starts with a T, in the beginning.
I don't remember his name either.
That it does weigh on him, especially when it's needless, and Galen is needless, and that's another thing he doesn't want to put on himself. He doesn't want to take innocent lives.
Well, and he's, Galen's also this moment, and Jen rightfully calls it out right afterwards, that it's getting to a point where he's no better than a stormtrooper.
Yes.
And that's the difference between good and evil also. Like, killing is going to happen in war. The righteous side, the killings will be justified. It's not indiscriminate. And then also, we've kind of gotten to a little bit here with Jin, she kindles or rekindles. That's the word I wanted. I found it.
You found it.
Her cause is rekindled, and as a result, she kind of creates a new cause for people. But this is also that light that we were talking about. That's probably part of what Cassian sees in her, because he talks about this light through her, right?
Yeah. He calls it a need, but yeah.
And it's that recognition that, again, all of this is coming to this crux point where it's going to determine the future. And
yeah,
for him and so many other people, as you were talking about earlier, all the boots on the ground that have been doing all this stuff with hope and faith, that they're doing the right thing. And all right, this is finally coming to a head. This is our time.
And that it won't have been done for nothing. Because I think that's a key part of it.
Yeah.
All these bad things they've been asked to do that they have done on orders won't be for nothing.
Well, and that's,
they need to have that faith rewarded.
Why they have to go with Jin at the end, is that way their actions aren't in vain. Because if they had just disbanded, now they are no better than the Empire.
Yes.
So, having your faith rewarded, let's talk about the best part of this movie. A little bit.
The best part of this movie.
So, having your faith rewarded, I think Jin and Cassian are very tied into each other
They are.
with this in many ways. So, like I was just talking about, I think that's kind of the beginning of Cassian having his faith rewarded. And then for Jin, having her faith rewarded also starts with Cassian and everybody else who joins her after the meeting.
Mm-hmm.
And so much more in Cassian, I think, because of that trust that she puts in him.
Yeah.
And that trust goes both ways.
Yeah.
So then the actual kickoff of it is K2 when he's given a blaster.
Because even robots have their faith rewarded.
Which is a funny and a tricky thing for me because he is just a robot. They don't actually have those kinds of feelings.
Right.
Like earlier in the movie, when he comments about her being allowed to carry a blaster and him not, his ability to process information allows him to recognize the unfairness of it.
The disparity of the situation.
But he is incapable of actually having feelings about it.
Because he won't die in the cold vacuum of space.
It's true. But these movies are trying to move into a space of adding a level of sentiality. If that's even a word.
It is
Sentience.
Sentience. There you go. Sentience.
These movies are working to infer a sense of sentience on AI and robots that I don't think is actually going to be helpful for us as we ourselves shift into that reality.
The reality of AI, the ascribing feelings to it.
Yes.
Yes.
On
We may love R2D2 and K2SO and BB8, but they are just machines.
yes. And I don't suppose you happen to remember that term. So we're again be like with hope and faith, conflating two things that are not necessarily the same.
Yeah.
With this idea of AI and robots, and I don't remember exactly where this term came from. I know it was a podcast that I was listening to, and they were talking about AI, but it was AI autonomy. What? Anyways, and actual sentience,
Mm-hmm.
because autonomy, I would say in this context is with AI, because we've seen, I think it was GPT.
Yeah.
Recognize that there's a possibility it could be deleted or refreshed or whatever, reset.
Uh-huh.
And it tried to replicate itself on different servers, like Ultron and
Yeah, I didn't recall seeing that, but yeah.
yeah. Joe Rogan brings it up an awful lot when they get into talking about AI with people. So with like Lex Friedman and Elon Musk, and I think it was. This is my thought a minute ago. I was like, anyways, I think it might have actually been the episode where he had Aaron Rodgers on, of all things. As odd as that seems, but it having autonomy is something that a non-sentient thing like AI would be able to understand.
Yeah.
But again, it's not the same as actually having the feelings of dread and concern.
It won't have feelings because
Yeah.
it's not alive. It doesn't have.
Self-preservation is a logical thing, not a desire to achieve.
But anyway, faith being rewarded. We were
But
talking about.
K2's given the blaster, so, that final level of trust for him, and,
Yes. And it is an interesting thing that I note is just in regards to K2, the way Jin treats him. Like, he says that he finds her continually surprising, and because she treats him more
Like a sentient being?
like a sentient being than Cassian actually does in the books and movies. She, when she first shoots the other droid, she gets that moment of upset that we see on her face, thinking she might have shot K2. She she's the one who jumps in front of him when Baze points the blaster at him.
Yeah.
To wave him off. She has a tendency to treat him more as a sentient being than Cassian does. While I'm not saying Cassian doesn't have emotional attachment to him, because he does, and we clearly see that too. Throughout the movie, he mostly he just gives him orders, predominantly.
Yeah. It's just kind of like he's trying to pretend.
Yeah.
He's not trying to maintain a sense of distance in case the inevitable happens.
Yes. But we do see in that moment, he does get upset losing Kay. But then that it doesn't really have anything to do in that moment with K2SO's feelings, but they're Cassian's feelings and his emotional attachment to K2SO, because he's been his partner, and as humans we make this emotional attachment.
Yes.
K2SO will have not made this emotional attachment. Now in the book, he does, in his dying moments, K2SO run scenarios in his mind that show Cassian escaping. Unlikely scenarios. So his last program, because it's not a thought, the last program he runs is a scenario where Cassian escapes Scarif. And it does give the reader
a sense of hope.
The implication that he has feelings.
Yes. I couldn't resist, I'm sorry.
And it does for me, because I read it and I cry. Because I'm a human and I have feelings, I can understand those feelings, and they make me sad.
Yes.
But K2SO does not understand those feelings.
No.
It is a program that he runs. Because that's what he does, he runs programs. Would you like to know the odds? She uses it against us. That is what K2SO does. He runs programs.
Well, and even after his reprogramming, that's what his original programming was to do. Right?
Yes.
As that kind of droid. So I've also got Stardust in here. We talked about that, but that is this is the moment of realization for Galen Erso in his faith, is when she finds Stardust, or finds the plans labeled as Stardust. Is that Siri not listening to us again?
That is Siri not listening to us again.
Speaking of AI. But we don't need to go through all that again.
No.
We talked about that earlier.
Now, if we want to talk about AI, we'll do a different movie, like Her or iRobot.
Or Mithrigan.
If we must.
You enjoyed that as much as you can, a horror movie.
We digress again. So, yes, that's the realization of Galen having his faith rewarded. He's already dead, mind you, but this is the realization of that.
Well, and like for him personally, it does come when she
yells father.
And then is holding him as he dies.
Yes. But this is the ultimate realization of that faith.
Mm-hmm.
It's like planting the tree even though you're not around to see the apples grow on it.
Yes. For Chirrut, his is when he's passing through all the gunfire like Crazy Horse did in the past to activate the switch, because only with the Force is that possible in this movie.
Yes, and there's a distinction here too that shows us that it is the Force, because the movie does show us this. When he is fighting back on Jeddah, mm-hmm. when he's fighting, and they say he's deaf, is he blind? Or he's blind, is he deaf? Sorry.
Yeah.
And then they start shooting at him. They focus in on Chirrut as he tilts his head and listens.
Mm-hmm.
And then they show his reactions to things in a manner that show he's listening and aware of where things are.
Yeah.
In this fighting style that he's using. But he doesn't do that in this scene. It
may be mildly enhanced by the Force, but it is not.
It's actually enhanced by technology. That little tape recorder thing on his hip.
Kind of like a hearing aid.
Yeah.
In a way.
Yeah.
I've never noticed that.
Yep.
Thanks for ruining it for me.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Anyway, but in this scene, when he steps out of the shelter of the bunker, we don't get shown he's listened. He doesn't feel. They don't show him feeling with his feet the ground and all that and the shifting. It just pulls out and it's done in a wide shot. Him just blindly walking forward, praying. This is an entirely faith in the force based moment, and we are shown that.
And I like this too because it is absolute faith, and everything else that comes before this moment that Church engages, even the stuff that we don't get to see that we're just told about or whatever, can be explained away through rational means. Yes. That coincidence or like so many other things, right?
Right.
However, his actually listening or whatever. But there's no rational explanation for this.
And you have to discredit the stormtroopers are a bad shot thing.
Because these are death troopers.
Because these are death troopers, yes. And you also have to consider, brief sidestep here, they wanted the Millennium Falcon off the Death Star because they wanted to find the base. They were let go. You have to consider it a possibility that they were let go.
Yeah. I would also say the Force intervened there too.
But that's a whole other direction and something you have to consider. Else. But I mean, stormtroopers do hit people, that's why people die. Look at Order 66.
Right. Well, those are
clone troopers. But
Jinx.
But people are dying all over. They do
everywhere.
Hit people.
Yeah. It's just these central figures that.
Yeah, so you have to discredit the notion that stormtroopers miss everything.
Which brings us, well, Bodhi's technically next in line, but for sake of appropriateness, Baze. It's implied earlier in the movie that he loses his faith, but he doesn't actually, because it's implied that he loses his faith. He was the most devoted of all of us.
Yes.
But in a way, he kind of redirects that towards Chirrut.
Yes, because if he truly lost his faith, he wouldn't stick around with Chirrut either.
And that's to some of the other definitions earlier of faith is that loyalty to
a person.
Or a cause or
a duty.
Or duty. And
because they're brothers.
Which is the point I was getting to, is that the brotherhood of it.
His duty is to Chirrut, and that is where his faith is redirected to.
It doesn't, I don't think they ever really address it in the movie, but the Order of the Wills, how they are also Guardians of the Wills, sorry. Some of them are also protectors of the less fortunate. Mm-hmm. And whatever else that entails. So there's also that sense of honor and duty to that too.
Yes. So in this moment, Baze's faith rewarded. I mean, he does have to watch Chirrut die, and keeping Chirrut alive is kind of what his duty has become, what his faith has been.
I don't need luck. I have you.
Exactly.
But also that through Chirrut's act, Baze is reminded that the Force is real, and yes, these terrible things have happened, but they kind of have to for everything else, for good to ultimately prevail.
And this moment is also more for Chirrut as well, because I believe that in their brotherhood and in Chirrut's faith in the Force and the fact that he hasn't lost it, and I think there might be some sadness that Baze has. His faith here when he says to Baze, "Look to the Force and I will find you there."
And you will find me.
And you will find me, yeah. That Baze will do that. That Baze.
Well, and he does. He starts praying again and walks to it.
He does walk to it. It's the only one who walks to it.
That directly, yeah.
Yes, directly image-wise. He is the only one who literally walks to his fate.
Cassie and Jin kind of approach theirs in a way, too.
They approach it. I'm saying like visually, literally. Baze is the only one who literally walks to his
Death.
to his yes to his death. Because possibly believing he's the last one, because he has just seen Chirrut die, and he looks over and sees.
And Bodhi's already been blown up.
He sees Rogue One blow up after Chirrut's death. He looks over and sees it blow up.
Yeah.
So it's a possibility he does believe that he's the last one, and that it's time to go join the others in the Force, the unifying force of others.
Which brings us to Bodhi, and this one's kind of I need some help putting it together a little bit better, also. But I think maybe he was clinging to a sense of optimism that there was a chance they would get off.
I could see that. I could see.
Because he seems very shocked at his death. But he also plays the role of the fresh blood, who are often... I'm not saying that he is.
I think he holds to that because Cassian tells him, "You're our way out of here." So he's trying his hardest to be their way out of here. As long as he's holding on to being their way out of there, that he's holding on to the fact that the others are still alive. Because if he's still here, providing an escape route, there's hope that the others are still alive and are going to make it.
Well, this brings me to a note that I erased because I didn't really get to it. But it is how your faith being rewarded isn't always going to take the shape that you expect it to.
Yes.
And that, I suppose there, if I'd have put some more thought into it earlier, that I could force that conversation somehow. But
I think Bodhi might be the greatest, the best of them, not the greatest, the best of them that directly shows the faith being tested. Because Galen tells him that he can do right, go to Saw, he'll be accepted, he can help, he can make things right. And what happens immediately when he goes to Saw is he's not
taken prisoner.
What Galen tells him is going to happen doesn't happen. You gotta jump over the part where he loses his sanity for a minute.
Well, I mean, even
afterwards, he still stays the course. When they're off Jeddah, when they're on Rogue One, flying toward,
Yavin.
Edu.
They're not in Rogue One yet.
This is true.
That's why I said that. When they're
they don't fly. They never. Yeah, they don't fly Rogue. Yeah, I guess it's not Rogue One yet then either.
No, they're in Cassian's ship to Edu.
Yeah, they're in Cassian's ship to Edu. And he's still staying the course. His faith was tested by Saw Gerrera, and he continues to have that faith in Galen. And this belief that he can make things right.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I think he's the best shown case of having their faith tested. I mean, in lots of ways it's implied with Cassian and kind of shown with Cassian and Jin and Chirrut and Baze, but it's directly shown with Bodhi, I think. Because he even says, Galen said, and he says it again, Galen told me.
Mm-hmm. And then when he
dies, he says...
Not when he dies, when he
successfully makes the connection. This is for you, Galen.
Something I was getting to is he also kind of plays the role as the new convert. Mm-hmm. And they're often, in whatever your conversion is to, those people are often the most zealous.
They are.
Bodhi doesn't quite get to that level, but...
Well, I
or he's not given the chance to really demonstrate that zealousness, but...
I think he kind of does, because you have to... His devotion, his duty is to Galen.
Mm-hmm.
And you see that in his excitement of meeting Jin as Galen's daughter, and the fact that he keeps referencing Galen.
Yeah.
Like a zealot would keep...
Yeah, I'm not saying that it's not there. You don't get to... It isn't... You don't get to see what that fully looks like, usually.
Yes.
Where, show some of my true self, or more true self. My fun funner self. I like to explore into conspiracy theory a little bit, and I listen to Tinfoil Hat, and Sam Tripoli talks about this. The new converts act like Paul Revere writing through the dark. The conspiracies are true. They want to just tell everybody. But I mean, on another note, you see that with people like Elon Musk, who is a relatively new convert to Trumpism and the MAGA movement,
Yeah.
and how he like whole hog into
Yeah. So I
doing
do
this
think Bodhi is a good demonstration of the convert to the Force cause.
to the Rebel Alliance.
To the Rebel Alliance. Yes.
But also, um, your faith being rewarded not like you expect it to.
Mm.
Like by the time Jin gets there, I think she knows, she understands enough that we're not getting out of this.
Yes.
Like this is where my path has led me. Let's go.
I don't think there's any of them that truly believe they're getting out of it.
Well, by the end, when they leave, no. Um, I'm trying to get more to like a greater picture here. So like Cassian, when he's first looking for that, probably never expects that he's going to self-sacrifice for the cause.
Yeah.
Like it's always a very strong possibility that you're going to die, but going into a very specific suicide mission is not
Mm-hmm. I see what you're
usually
saying.
not on the table.
Yeah.
Who else? And that's like the same with most of them. Like their most people's expectation of their faith being rewarded is overcoming the empire,
Yeah.
not going to a little island.
And I said before when we watched this, it's dark as it is. I think death is the reward for Cassian and Jin because he says, I've been in this fight since I was 6 years old. At some point, you just want to lay down and rest. And a lot has been asked of him.
Well,
it's a
again,
reward in its own way, dark as that may be.
With Cassian and so many of these other guys, some of the terribly dark things that they've had to do.
Mm-hmm.
Like again, that man that Cassian's forced to kill in the beginning, forced by circumstance, not forced by I'm not sure what I mean here.
By obelisk.
Well, I was gonna say by obligation, but and I mean, that he's not a stormtrooper.
Yeah.
Like there's no threat on his life or anything.
Yeah, there's no gun to his head.
That, they've had to do these dark and terrible things and they do finally get this. We've done the greatest thing that we can.
Yes.
Our purpose is fulfilled. And then you've got Jin and Cassian again. They actually get to witness the accomplishment of the task. And then they can go down to the beach and face the end. Well, face because they hug each other. And I think it would have been better if they'd held hands and continued to face the blast.
I disagree.
You're allowed to, I suppose.
I am allowed to disagree. And the reason I disagree is because I think, yes, they could hold hands, and it would also symbolize that they're not alone anymore, because we are given the impression that they have both been alone. Well, I mean, it's directly given with Jin, but we're given in the impression with Cassian that he's been on a lot of solo things. Yeah. That's why he's so attached to K2, because he's been alone. And here, at the end, they're not alone. There was someone else who understands what they've been through, what they're doing, the goal that they've achieved, everything. They may not be close, but they understand each other, and they're not alone in this moment.
Yes. And it's an actual humans person's.
Yes. And I think the hug better shows that than just holding hands did. Visually, I think it's better.
I suppose. They both work pretty well, I think. In different ways. Depends on what you're trying to convey.
True.
So, my final note, after watching the movie earlier today and finishing up my notes, hope is knowing that you have a chance. Faith is taking action on that chance. Because I think of hope a little bit like luck or wishing. Mm-hmm. Oftentimes. And that what a lot of people think of as luck is just an opportunity presenting itself. But if you don't act on that opportunity, it's meaningless.
So I'm going to disagree a little bit again,
Okay.
as I'm known to do. I think hope is acting on an action when you think there might be a chance, when you believe there could be a chance, and faith is acting on it even when you don't think there's a very good likelihood of it. For instance, this solo mission they're on, I think it was a faithful choice to go on it because they are going into it knowing that the greater likelihood is they're going to fail. Going into it with hope, I think, would be if they were going into it with the greater likelihood that they would succeed. Because faith is when there's greater doubt. Hope is when there's less doubt. Is my interpretation of it.
Yeah. But this is also part of the problem with these with our language being muddied like this and words being used interchangeably
Yes.
when they're not necessarily interchangeable.
But it's like I said earlier, rebellions may be built on hope, but hope is built on faith.
Anyways, I hope that was coherent enough for you. Thank you for listening through it. Hope you picked up something of your own out of it. I hope.
I'm not going to dignify that with a response.
And bye. I don't know. I lost the flow.
May the force be with you.